Hi, I'm Dave, president of Riptide. I'll be assembling a Riptide SL. As I proceed, I'll go step by step through the instructions just as it's shown. All right, step one, install the orange battery pads. Make sure you use the large flat washers. Then you're going to take the securing bar. We're going to leave these loose for now, and we'll tighten them when we adjust it for the battery. Step two, install the axle. Take the axle, I like to lay it right across the frame. When you put your axle hangers onto the axle, make sure that they're pointing down in this direction. Slide them on, and then take your bolts. Make sure the bolts insert from the inside to the outside with the nuts on the outside. That just makes sure there's plenty of room for your bins to install without hitting the nuts. And you're going to want to center the axle, which is easy to see because there's some indents here. And I'm just kind of centering it up. And for the most part, they're right on the edge of the hanger. Okay, I'm centering it up. Now I'm going to take the two 13mm wrenches. I'm going to snug the nuts down. Don't get too tight right now because we're going to do a little adjustment on the axle. Okay, now with your bolts snug, just take, and you can do this with the palm of your hand, but if you have a hammer handy, it can't hurt. Just tap the axle up. And this ensures that it's sitting onto the frame straight so the bumpers will sit onto the ground properly. For this step, I'm going to go ahead and use an impact gun. Just makes it faster and easier, but you don't have to. You can certainly just use the wrenches. Okay, after the axle is completely installed, we're going to tighten these set screws. And that just keeps the axle from rotating inside the hangers while the cart is in use. All right, once those are nice and tight, you've got washers, which are going to be used to install the wheels. Step three is installing the wheels, so we're going to go ahead and prepare for that right now. And I like, these washers are actually rounded on one side. I like to put the rounded part towards the wheel. Gives the bearing a little more clearance for operating nicely without squeaking. I'm going to open the anti-seize here, and I'm going to put a nice bead of it right down the top of the axle. Then I just like to use the plastic bag to smooth it out, which just keeps your fingers clean because this stuff is tough to get off. Then we're going to take a wheel and slide it onto the axle. And we're going to take another washer with the rounded part inward towards the wheel. And we're going to put the collar on to the axle, and we're going to tighten it up and make sure you get it very, very tight. You don't want your wheel falling off while you're driving down the road. Okay, step 4. We're going to install the handlebar, And to do that, we need the handlebar bolts, which are in a packet like everything else. I'm going to put the washers on all of the bolts to begin with. Just seems to be a little easier this way. And now I'm going to install the handlebar. The bolts have to go through from the outside to the inside. And then the nut goes on the inside. Okay, I'm going to snug the middle pivot bolt down. It seems to be helpful when you're doing this because it allows you to do your handlebar adjustment without it moving around on you. I'm using a 15 and a 17 millimeter wrench. 17 on the outside, 15 millimeter on the nut. Now, when I adjust this, I'm going to take it so that the edge of the slot is right on the edge of the nut. That tends to be a nice adjustment for a Group 27 battery. Gets your weight and your balance just right. And I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to use an impact gun to tighten it down all the way. Okay, I'm going to install the battery and adjust the battery compartment to fit it nicely. I'll start with the split rings. The split rings install onto the aluminum rods right here on the cart frame. Leave them loose for now. We will be adjusting them later. Using a hammer, I'm going to use the handle and tap the battery pads nice and tight to the battery. I use a 10 millimeter wrench and I'm going to tighten the top pad, which locks the battery down. And now, for the sake of getting at the side bolts, I'm going to slide the battery back out. The battery compartment is actually designed so that they can install the battery or hook up the battery while it's sitting here in front of the unit. And to do so, we're going to hook the wires up and have them leading back to the back of the battery like this. Always use a wrench and make sure the terminals are very tight. It will prevent a lot of problems out in the field. Now I'm going to slide the battery back into position, making sure the wires don't pinch into the back. And by having the wires run to the back, it actually keeps everything nice and contained inside the cart without the wires hanging out. Now we're going to adjust the spring rod to the cart, which will hold the battery in position perfectly without allowing any movement at all. All right, this is why we left the split rings loose. So we can put the spring rod in place and then push the split rings up to it. All right, so when you secure the battery in place with the spring rod, this portion of the spring rod goes behind the split ring right here, and the other end goes behind the split ring on the other side, and that's what actually secures it in place. Okay, we're going to install the bins now. The front bin simply slides into position, and the back bin has two locking nubs on the back as well as on the front. The front ones go underneath the round aluminum bar on the tube there, and on the back it goes underneath this back bar. Drop the bin into position and then lift the front of the bin onto the axle and lock it in place. I placed the vacuum head on the cart with the steering knuckle facing forward so that you can easily attach your pole without taking the vacuum out of the cart. I wrapped the cord clockwise around the unit, going this direction here. That keeps you from bending the cord back in an unnatural way over here, which could potentially cause damage eventually. All right, we're gonna mount the cord clip onto the handlebar now. In doing so, the steel pin is oriented upward on top. Your T20 torque bit is inside your diagnostic toolkit that comes with the Riptide, and you'll use that to mount the cord clip. Okay, we want the right space between the coil and the spring here. We don't want the spring resting on the coil. We want a little space there. And now we're going to tighten these screws up real tight so that it can't move at all, can't rotate. Once it's completely installed, there's going to be a little space between the coil of cord and the spring. And to remove it, you lift the cord or the plug at least 90 degrees and then it releases. When you put it back in, as soon as it rotates a little bit, it's locked in there, it can't pull out. And it just completely rotates down until it stops. There is no snap, it just stops in place. Attaching the bag. When attaching a bag onto the Riptide vacuum head, insert the ridge on the vacuum head into the groove of the bag ring. And close together. Moving my hands back halfway, and I'm going to bend the ring in the middle. And it snaps on. So take it off. Two thumbs together with the top flange, fingers underneath the bottom flange, and curl it without pulling up at all. Okay, I'm going to assemble the transport rack. In doing so, all you do is take the handle, the orange handle, and we're going to make sure this rubber bumper is pressed up against the stop here and pull it into position so you can get the rod in the hole. And slide it through the other side. You're going to want it sticking out somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch on this end. And with a 19mm wrench, we're just going to snug this down a little bit for the time being. We're going to readjust this when it's on the vehicle, but I usually run the handle at an angle, something like that. I just find it to be convenient to release the machine. We're going to take the hook next, and we're going to drop the bolts into it. Put the nuts on. And we're going to leave those loose for now, and we'll adjust it when we put it on the cart. Okay, latch the transport rack onto the cart. We're going to clip the transport rack onto the bottom rod, and then snap the dog on here. Adjust the bottom hook bracket tight to the bottom of the cart. Hold it in place as you tighten the bolts. Thoroughly tighten nut number 1 on the right before tightening number 2 on the left. Make sure the carriage bolts are very tight. They are serrated so they will cut deep into the metal to prevent any chance of movement. We're going to use the U-bolts to attach the riser to the transport rack. Leave them loose for now. There are 3 sets of holes in the riser. We will be using the top and bottom sets. If your vehicle sits low to the ground, you may want to use the top and middle sets of holes. The anti-wobble bracket prevents the transport rack from moving around while you're driving. The bend goes towards the transport rack and the edge goes over the receiver on your vehicle. Secure the transport rack with the pin and locking pin. Use a 15mm wrench to tighten the anti-wobble plate. Now we will adjust the height of the transport rack. You need to consider the terrain you will encounter while driving to determine the height. Make sure your cart wheels won't hit the ground at any point during transport. Slide the transport rack to the desired height and tighten the U-bolts with a 15mm wrench. Use a 19mm wrench to ensure the release handle is tight. Using the transport rack, place the bottom rod of the cart into the hook bracket of the transport rack. Pivot the cart up until the dog snaps over the top rod. Remember, always secure the cart with the safety pin before driving. All right, that completes your Riptide SL setup. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to email or call. We're always here to help.